Welcome to the Unchurching Podcast.
There's just so much more.
Welcome back. Today, we're joined by someone whose journey will feel familiar to a lot of you. Not because it's identical, but because it's proof that life on the other side of leaving church can be rich, expansive, and full of unexpected discovery. David Trotter spent 10 years as a pastor, or in America, a pastor, in Southern California before stepping away from church leadership 17 years ago. Since then, he's become a transformational coach, a guided meditation facilitator, and an embodied breathwork facilitator, all while founding and publishing Awaken magazine, where he shares conversations with spiritual voices from all walks of life. He's also an author of more than a dozen books and the producer and director of 4 feature-length documentaries that shine a light on human stories and social issues, expanding the conversation on what it means to live awake and engaged in the world. What you'll hear today is 2 former church leaders, both of us having walked this awakening journey, exploring the common threads, hard lessons, and life-giving discoveries we've made along the way. I should also say that David and I haven't spoken much before this, just for 10 minutes before this conversation. And so this is completely fresh, and I'm very excited to have this convo. David's work is all about helping people awaken to love, light, and limitless possibilities. And he's sat across from healers, mystics, and teachers that many of us never would have encountered in our church days. We're going to talk about what it's like to move through the unraveling of belief, the practices and people that shaped him along the way, and the wisdom he's gathered after more than a decade of exploring life beyond the walls of religion. David, welcome to the Unchurching Podcast.
Thank you so much, Clint. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. It's great to be in conversation with you.
I love what you guys are doing. Of course, had the privilege of meeting your wife, Mandy, on a conversation about Awaken magazine. Seems like you guys have had quite a journey together, and what a fantastic tale it is to be able to do that with a spouse.
Yeah. She is amazing. We actually met a little over 3 years ago. So we've been together 3 years, and have one of my greatest desires was to have somebody that I could help make a difference in the world with, somebody that I could actually collaborate with on a daily basis. And so we have a couple of different things that we work on. She has a studio called Behind the Lids in Orange County, where we lead breathwork and meditation classes along with a lot of other facilitators. And so I get to help her with that project. And I started Awaken magazine, and so she helps me with that project. So it's a great collaboration.
It's incredible. It's similar with my wife, Rochelle. Now, as our listeners know, she's also involved in the space, but also growing radically in this awakening journey. There's something about that, right? There's just something powerful about having that partner by your side who does get it. And I've seen some of the opposite of that, and it's really tough. I'm not sure how people go through that when you're on distinctly different pages. I used to think that was tough in Christianity, but I think with this sort of freedom, even more so.
Yeah, without a doubt. We have people all the time, and it's generally women who come to the studio, right, to do breath work and sound baths and so forth. And they're like, yeah, my husband's just not into this. He would never come to something like this. So it's a challenge.
What is it with you guys? Come on, man. The guys that are engaged are loving it. They're growing. They're knowing more themselves. They're overcoming all of those little boy demons that we all carry as men.
Yep.
Get in there. Do your thing. Yeah. It's breathing. How intimidated can you be? Come on, guys.
Right. Well, you go deep. When you breathe deep, you go deep.
That's so true. That's true. So I don't know your story behind Christianity. I don't know if you're still involved in a church, or if you left church. I know you certainly left church leadership. You want to fill me in on some of that? How did that all come about, and what were some of the things that stood out to you during that time that made you think, there might be something different?
Yeah, yeah. I actually grew up in a house church movement when I was a kid in the state of Kentucky here in the United States. And it was considered at the time to be kind of pseudo cult-ish, but I had a great experience with it. It was called the Covenant or Shepherding Movement in the 70s and 80s. And then my family and I moved to Northern California to actually start a church. And so my dad started a church when I was a senior in high school. I had this calling experience where I felt like I was supposed to be in ministry. It wasn't something my parents pushed on me. It was something that happened to me at a big, huge youth event when I was 18. And so I pursued that, went to Christian college, went to seminary, and then entered into full-time ministry in 1998 in a church here in Southern California, Orange County. It started out with about 100 people, and within the first year, there was about 1,000 people in attendance. And I was the associate pastor at 25 and completely over my head. And ironically, didn't think that I had enough responsibility. And, I was just, just a kid, and ended up leaving that church after a couple years to start an online platform to highlight churches that would now be called, back in the day, the emerging church. So that website was called theooze.com. And so my partner, Spencer Burke, and I started that website and did that for several years, but continued on in full-time ministry for a decade. And I ended up starting my own church. I was a, kind of entrepreneurial church planner type. I loved seeing okay, how could I create experiences where people would be coming together and experiencing life transformation? I used a lot of tools of communications and even marketing. Our church had a full-size city bus wrapped with branding. It had a car, a Scion XB, giving out bottles of water at events. Those types of big thinking, unique things for a small church in the early 2000s. That was, it was very fun. The challenge was that I was simultaneously trying to fill a void of not enoughness inside of me. I kept thinking, if I could grow this church big enough, if I could help enough people, if I could get that book deal, if we could have not just one location, but 3 locations, what about 9 locations? Then I'll finally feel like I'm somebody. I finally feel like I'm enough. And so we did have 3 locations and probably a dozen staff. And in 2008, I just imploded, just completely imploded. I was burned out, overwhelmed. Financial crisis was kind of hitting the United States at that time. That was hitting a lot of churches. And I chose to connect with a woman who was not my wife. And in the process, I just decided this is too much for me. And I resigned and just walked away, literally walked away in a weekend from what I had invested my entire life into. And that did not go well. That woman ended up leaving me about a month and a half later. And I had walked away from all that I had invested, all the ways that I was trying to help people. And I checked myself into a mental hospital for 3 days just because I was vacillating between I'm okay to curled up in a ball on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, wanting to end my life. And so I was able to get my head back straight through some meds. Ended up getting a brain scan through the Amen Clinic. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Daniel Amen wrote a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And through brain scans of understanding activity levels in the brain, that transformed my way of thinking about myself. I began to learn that my brain was very overactive in some ways and underactive in other ways. And started to recognize, okay, I didn't choose that. I didn't choose this brain chemistry that I had been wrestling with for much of my life. The people that were helping me at the time were like, you have you have the brain of an entrepreneur and you have been living this out. Go, always need stimulus. Your prefrontal cortex, where you're making decisions based on kind of wisdom, it's a little low in terms of its functionality. And so I had this sense of relief of going, okay, that's why I think this way or I'm feeling this way. But then I had to take responsibility for it and go, okay, what do I do then? How do I change the way that I interact with the world? Is church environment the best environment for me to function in? And I found in the process, I went through a lot of personal growth, therapy, development, and at the time, chose to reconcile with my then wife, and we got back together and headed down that path. Ultimately, that marriage ended a number of years later. But yeah, so my path out of church ministry wasn't, okay, I'm struggling with this theologically. It was, I'm struggling with this internally. How do I like navigate my own internal world? And even though I could have reached out for support, I didn't. And that's one of the things that is so clear when I talk to, oftentimes it's guys who end up imploding, whether it's in ministry or in business or whatever. You have access to resources. I knew I had access to people that I could talk to or turn to, but I was too ashamed. I thought I couldn't, I was too overwhelmed. I thought I couldn't find a way out of this situation. And that rather than finding a way to unwind where I was, I thought it's just easier to just blow it all up and walk away. And that's when, you're in your head. You're just completely in your head. And if I would have taken the time just to jump into that therapy that I knew I had access to, or jump into those friends that I knew I could talk to, they could have helped me get out of my head and recognize that there were other options available to me. I thought there was only one option. And so, yeah, that's the early process.
Yeah. It's fascinating. There's so many things that just jump out to me there that I think can help people on this journey. Things like that initial call when you felt called to ministry. I've had that, also felt like this is the calling of my life and this is who I'm meant to be. And I feel like in some regard, the context of me being brought up as a Westerner with Christianity being the driving force of that is the paradigm that I saw as the expression of doing that. I wonder what other paradigms would have been had I been born somewhere else or done something else. But all these years down the line, what do you attest that sense back then to, that feeling, that calling? How would you define that now? Because I think that a lot of people struggle to step away from what they know. And one of the things is that initial moment they had in church where they felt that belonging, that calling, whether that's to leadership or just being part of church or calling yourself a Christian or such, or whichever religion it may be. How would you define that feeling now?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things have come to my mind over the years, because I asked that question. It's like, okay, have I just blown this whole situation? Like, God called me to make this difference in the world, and I just effed it up. Like, I really have royally just messed this whole thing up. And I remember when I was leaving staff of that church here in Orange County, and at the time I was fascinated by fountain pens, and so the pastor and the staff got me this really, really nice fountain pen, and they had engraved on it, it said, Pastor David Trotter. And I was transitioning out at that moment to do this online platform, as I mentioned, the ooze.com. And he said to me that day, he goes, no matter if you ever work in a church again or not, you will always be a pastor, because there's something like unique about your life, your calling. There's something there. And so, as you mentioned, because of upbringing, because of that conditioning, because of that environment, I think, well, it looks like this, right? It looks like being the person on a church staff. And that has radically changed for me now. I see that, I can make an impact in the world and even play that pastoral role in people's lives. It really just means someone who's there to care and provide a sense of light in the midst of darkness, provide a word of encouragement, provide some sense of direction, perhaps. One of the things that happened to me later this happened probably about 3 years ago. I experienced something called 5-MeO-DMT. That is a plant medicine. Well, I shouldn't say it's plant medicine. It is a medicine that actually comes from the Bufo alvarius toad. It is a secretion behind the ears of that toad that when it is dried and then smoked, it is the most powerful hallucinogenic on the planet. And this fast forwards, obviously, way in my story. But having experienced that several years ago, I went through this process of that medicine, the divine consciousness, showing me every single moment that I would consider like a strong marker in my Christian life. And
wow,
as I'm seeing these flashbacks simultaneously, for the very first time ever, I had previously, and this is backtracking to part of my story, when I was 18, I was in a charismatic Pentecostal type church where I began to speak in tongues as a high schooler. And that had been part of my life, but had really been set aside because the churches that I were a part of were more mainstream evangelical churches that was like, okay, let's not do that. That's going to freak people out. Let's let's put that to the side. And yet the spiritual environment that I have stepped into in the last 3 to 5 years, that type of experience, what would be called in this context, light language, is welcomed. And so as I'm under the medicine, I began to, for the very first time, speak this light language involuntarily. It began to come out of me with such force, Clint, I could not stop it. It is just flowing through me as I'm simultaneously seeing all of these snapshots of me in my Christian life / pastoral calling. And my arm is, and I know viewers were just hearing this, but it's going from above my head and coming down with such force with this fist and kind of like anchoring in, like my elbow is shooting straight down as my fist is coming down by the edge of my face as I'm speaking this language and as I'm having these flashbacks. And it was this overwhelming sense that source consciousness, God, the divine, is reminding me, your calling has never gone away. You are called to be a messenger of love, of light on this planet, and nothing, you can't screw that up. You can't mess it up. That calling is there, and you are now functioning in that calling in a different context, in a different space. But it is the same love. It is the same transformational power. It is coming from the same source. It is just being expressed in a different way. It was just an incredibly powerful reminding of that calling that I experienced when I was 18. And now, as you said, you're right, it looks a little different. But for so many of us who, whether it's stepping away from the church or in my case, screwing up my life by making some really poor choices, I don't think for most of us that calling goes away. You can be reminded of it, and it can flow through and be expressed in a different way. And it's the unique path of going, well, how is it going to be expressed? How is it going to come through? Is it still just as good? Is God disappointed? How long will God be disappointed in me? Am I not going to make as big of a difference? Am I trying to now help people in the world out of penance, right? Out of like, I've got to pay God back for the things that I did, wrong in my past. I think for me, I've had to release those things and just go, okay, it's a new season. There's a same calling, different expression. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm living that journey at the moment where I'm sort of on the other end of my initial awakening journey and discovering my new identity. And by new, I mean it's actually doing away with the paradigms, many of which you've mentioned, the things that hold us captive, the things we're taught. And, we've mentioned in this podcast before, paradigms. There are paradigms that are political. There are ones that are social. There are ones that are cultural. But when you come to the religious paradigm, it's a very strong one because it is so spiritual. It really does hold you. And it's extremely laughable when you just stand back and look at it, because every church, every denomination, every religion has different paradigms, different
Right.
containers that you're supposed to stay in, and so a lot of the awakening journey is becoming free of the programming, being free of the conditioning around all of this. And as you go through that, you discover yourself, but you also move emotionally from a place of really feeling sometimes guilty about the past and your involvement, sometimes fooled about your involvement, sometimes angry about it. And these things don't last. You work through them because you're discovering yourself, and the freedom comes actually very quickly. But then you move to a space where you start to recognize those moments, like you said, that are real. And they may have been narrow in that paradigm and in that box, but they are real. And now everything seems just so much broader. It's like God, however you define God, now got inside the box and just extended his, hers, or its elbows and went, boom, let's get out of this thing. And it's a beautiful thing to see the breadcrumbs along the way of your journey, and then see it happen and find solace that you are still that person. You were the person that was trying to bring good to people. That was in your heart. That is you.
Yes.
That's the real you. And it does still have a place. And so you're not, the misunderstanding is that you're letting go. That by leaving church, you're letting go of that feeling you first had. You're letting go of that calling you first had. And that's not what's happening at all. So it's a beautiful journey to freedom, actually, and to such bigger things. But I can't help but think that, your journey, we all have our places where we mess up. And it's amazing how we judge them all differently, especially in the church. We're like, oh, this is a minor sin. That's a major thing. Oh, can't be on leadership anymore, or just do repentance, or it's all this stuff that we make up, For me, I can understand that entrepreneurial spirit driving the ongoing basis of it. And mine wasn't in the church, it was in my business. But exactly the same paradigms that drive you away from your own identity and towards this paradigm of success, or I'll get there someday, and I think a lot of guys get trapped in this. Do you think that's some of the reason, the structures, the paradigms, the containers, the conditioning, that we do see so many pastors struggle with private sin, as we would define sin? I mean, it's not a word that I really relate to anymore, but as the church would define it, and coming to that point. I mean, I came to the same point, just through a different route. That's the thing about it. There's no higher or lower, but why is there so much of that brokenness showing up in leadership in the church?
Yeah, I think, well, for one, when your paycheck is tied to your performance, in terms of like your behavior, like whether it's any type of, whether you call it addiction or a need to kind of explore something or express something that's outside the walls of behavior that's accepted, and then your paycheck is tied to that, then you're going to keep it quiet, right? Especially if you've got young kids or a wife or whatever it might be, trying to get help for that feels really unsafe. So it's really tough. Like, I recognize that for a church, you would need to have certain expectations in terms of people's behavior. So I wouldn't expect there to be no expectations. But at the same time, how do you somehow get the help that you need when your paycheck is tied to that performance? That's really, really hard. But, that's not much different than other aspects of business, right? If you're in wrestling with an addiction, you could lose your job. I know technically you should not be able to do that in terms of our legal system, but it can feel like I've got to keep this quiet in that context as well, right? My business partners, I can't let them know. So I think that the goal for me in working with any leader is to constantly be asking, is there something that is in my life that could derail the vision that I have, the desire that I have for authentic relationships? If there's anything that's in my life in that way, how am I looking at that as early as possible? How am I addressing that as early as possible, as opposed to starting to develop behaviors that are compensating for that thing that's happening inside of me? And that's just increasing self-awareness, right? And cultivating that self-awareness, I think, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely right. I feel like the silence extends as well. It does trickle down from leadership, and the silence is in the members, in the churchgoers. In a very real way, you learn to hide your faults. You learn to present the best version of yourself, even if that version doesn't feel real to you. You start to tie your identity to what you should be rather than discovering what you are. And I think that silence continues through awakening, where you don't feel you have the freedom to speak about the fact that you're questioning. You don't feel like you have the freedom to have conversations with family or friends that would be out of the norm, because they've seen your identity as one thing. And now it's another. I had somebody just message me on Instagram today who's known me since my Bible school days. And I was like, wow, I was really surprised to hear that you don't define yourself as a Christian anymore, but I'll listen to the podcast and see what that's about, And I'm like, yeah, the freedom comes in actually being open about where you are as a human being. And there's a line you have to cross in actually going, you know what? This is what I'm discovering. I'm going to speak more openly about it. And you find a certain freedom in that. Have you found that with some of the people that you work with?
Yeah, I think the greatest challenge it goes back to is I can't have freedom to talk about the things that I want to talk about if I am in a structure where my paycheck is tied to my belief system. So like one of the things that I wrestled with during that decade of Christian ministry was the inclusion of those who would identify as LGBTQ. Like that was a huge wrestle point in Southern California. I was in environments where we would have people, it's like, oh, this is a hip church. People would call, people would email, people would come. Hey, can we be part of this church? Yes, you can, but, right? There was always that but. And so the moment that I stepped outside of ministry and after my life had imploded and I kind of got my feet back underneath me and I started wrestling with some of these issues to go, wait, now that I'm not a pastor, I don't have to have all the right answers to fit in a certain box.
Oh, that is so big. That's so big.
It's so
that is
much
how you feel
freedom.
as a pastor. You have to have all the answers.
All the answers, and they have to be the right answers in that certain box. So now that I had stepped outside of that, I could start reading off the approved book list, right? I could start reading books that were different, So a couple of the books that I read helping me process through that LGBTQ, one is called Walking the Bridgeless Canyon, and another one was called Changing Our Minds by David Gushee. And I came to the place to go, okay, well, I'm just going to say, and it's gradual, like, oh, God loves those people. Maybe God didn't create them. Maybe God created them just as they are. Maybe, why do I keep saying they? Maybe I don't even need to say they anymore. Maybe and just, right, those baby steps and then releasing that and going, wow, I'm going to actually love these people that I know, people in my life that I know that are gay. I'm not going to think of them differently. I'm going to slowly release that. And then I began to release the concept, Clint, the ultimate issue of inclusion, which is heaven and hell. And the book that started me down that path was Rob Bell's book, Love Wins. In 2011, when that came out, and it's not that that's some big theological treatise on heaven and hell, but it was a very helpful book for me to go, wow, what if I believed that everybody gets a chance? Like everybody is welcome in heaven, still holding on to that concept of heaven at the time. And I remember I was on a film shoot. I was doing a film on LGBTQ inclusion in the church. It's called The Road to Edmond. It's available on Amazon. It was filmed with $75,000 over the course of 2 weeks in Oklahoma and Colorado, and it's a scripted B. It's a B-level movie, but when you watch it, knowing that we spent $75,000 on it, you're like, oh, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I was asking one of the guys that was one of our cinematographers. We were wrestling with this issue because the whole essence of the film is the inclusion of those, like that would identify as LGBTQ within the context of the church and the theological issues. And we were wrestling with the issue of heaven and hell. And I said, okay, well, if you truly believe that people who don't, quote unquote, follow Jesus, accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior, that they're going to hell, if you truly believe that, let me ask you this. How many people have you led to Christ in the last 10 years? How many people? How many people in the last 5 years? How many people in the last year? Well, really not many at all. I go, okay, so you have not led anyone to Christ personally in the last 5. I go, I've led hundreds to Christ through preaching, through individual evangelism. Blah, blah, blah. I go, so I would dare to say you don't actually believe that people are going to hell, because if you did, you'd actually be doing something about it. So your belief system doesn't match your behavior. So what if you released that belief system and said, I'm counting on God to take care of all that, and I'm actually just going to love all people, that everybody's in. And for me, that was a process of going, because I think as most Christians, you're aware of, especially when you're really in a church, especially an evangelical church, who's Christian and who's not Christian in this room. I'm aware of who's in and who's
all
out.
the time.
I'm always aware of it. And so now I'm going to release that and just say, we're all the same. Everybody's in. And when that day came, when I released that, I could feel it leave me. I felt such freedom, such a sense of relief that I don't have to keep track of who's in and who's out, or try to be aware of like, I've got to help them in some way. For those of you who are listening, if you haven't gone through that process, you maybe just try it on. You just kind of try it on in your head and go, what would that be like if I didn't have to worry about that anymore? It is such a sense of release. It was very powerful.
100%. 100%. That exclusivity box that I'm in and somebody else isn't, or our denomination's in and another denomination. I mean, you can break it down. It's ludicrous. It's insane thinking. But only feeds ego and feeds pride. And I think that's part of the downfall as well. Ultimately is wanting to hide our things and not be honest about them, or when we slip up, not ask for help. There's a lot of ego and pride in that, which is part of the death that happens in awakening. Your ego will die. And it's a very good thing. To be free of your own ego is an amazing thing. And so that's beautiful. It's funny how you mentioned the books that we were not allowed to read. I mean, some of them were literally listed in Bible college and in seminary, because I did both, Bible college and then 4 years of seminary for my theology degree. And some of them are listed, some of them are just unspoken, and you know that you're not allowed to go there. But the Rob Bell one's fascinating, because when I was in seminary, there were actually, and I was doing seminary online from the Middle East back to South Africa, and great school that I studied through, but they gave us Rob Bell teachings at one point as some set work. And I actually put in a formal complaint saying, how can we follow Rob Bell's teachings? This is what he teaches about marriage. This is what he teaches about same-sex relationships. This is and they actually removed it from the curriculum. And so I'm like, now on this side of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, how much of a Pharisee was I? So it's just an interesting journey that you take down the road. But the LGBTQ plus community, there's so much that I'm seeing at the moment about people helping these individuals deal with religious trauma because of how they were treated and such. And it's exactly like you say, yes, bring your gay friends to church. And we've spoken about on this podcast before, because my wife being a choreographer, a dancer, of course, we were around gay friends all the time. And it was wonderful. I truly miss those environments. But, and everybody's lost in a way. And so defining why people are lost is ego. And yes, you can bring them to church, but there's that undercurrent. It's like we expect them to change. We expect them to live holier. How do you be free in a place where you're feeling this expectation? It's just not possible. It's just not true freedom. And isn't that what we should be offering, So it's a fascinating one. I want to double back for a moment earlier you spoke about your DMT journey. And for those of you that don't know, and I haven't done it yet, but this is like a 6-minute thing. Like it's 5 or 6 minutes DMT, right? It's really quick. It gives you what you need in the moment.
Yeah, this is 5-MeO DMT, which is a little bit different. It is Bufo. And so it lasts anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And in that time, you had spoken about speaking in tongues, speaking in the Holy Spirit, and then a light language coming through. Were those languages the same to you? Did they feel the same? Did they feel like they had the same source? Did they sound the same? Because I'm also on this journey at the moment where I find myself speaking or praying in tongues randomly, minimalistically, but from time to time, and even in plant medicine ceremony on the weekend. And I'm wondering if that's my light language or if it's a different thing. What was your sense around all of that? Mm-hmm. Or what have you learned since?
Yeah, I have found that when I am taking medicine, that language that comes through can feel even more forceful, more powerful, and it can sound a little bit different. And so I haven't tried to figure out, nor have I come to any conclusions in terms of like, oh, this is different from this one or whatever. I just do know that when I'm on medicine, it can be what I would call involuntary, meaning it is coming through me in such a forceful way that I can't bottle it or stop it. It is so powerful. And I have had experiences in the last year. I don't know if I'll just go into a little bit of this plant medicine journey because if people haven't experienced it, it's very powerful. I had done psilocybin several times, and I was doing this as more of a spiritual exploration, my own healing process. And I would probably say a little year and a half ago, I went to a plant medicine ceremony, and it began with MDMA and then with psilocybin. And I had a sense before I went to the ceremony that I was going to experience the fullness of power and the fullness of love. I just had this sense. And in the middle of the experience, it's probably 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's dark. There's candles in the room. Mandy's laying next to me. All of a sudden, I pop up. I lay down and I'm popping up, and this light language comes out of me with force, involuntarily. It's filling the room with sound. It is, but I'm not conscious of it. I lay back down and I looked at her and I said, "Did I just say something?" And she's like, "Yeah. That was really loud. Whoa." I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But it was like this power came through me, Clint, that I've never felt before. It was a full body power that flowed all the way through my being as this is coming out of me. And then a few minutes later, I begin to feel my tongue moving inside my mouth, and my head is cranked to the right-hand side. And I could tell there is a message that is about ready to come through me that I've never had something like this happen before. Never. And I can see inside of one of the guys in the room. He was actually one of the leaders of the ceremony. And I pop up and I say his name, and this message comes out of me that I'm not consciously like communicating like I am now. It's coming out of me and is a message of empowerment, of encouragement. And for the next hour, I began to have all of these messages for every single person in the room coming out of me.
Wow.
And then they are coming over to me. I'm placing my hand on them. This light language is coming through me. I can see inside of them. I literally can see like something that's going on inside of them, and it's coming through me. This has happened multiple times now over the last year. And so I share this because it's like, whoa, this is fascinating. But when you enter into this world, for me, this has been 17 years of baby steps, one step after another. Oh, well, let me read this book on LGBTQ inclusion. Oh, interesting. Let me release that. Let me talk about this. Let me look into heaven and hell. I'm going to release that concept of who's in and who's out. Okay, now months would go by. of just allowing these things to integrate, right? A decision is made, there's integration. I'm having conversations with people. I'm trying to find a church. No, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel, let's do a house church. No, let's release that. Okay. It's what I'm trying to say is it's baby steps. I'm sharing this big experience of this medicine journey where I'm having this ability to what I would call channel and see inside of people. But it's 17 years of little baby steps of asking myself, what am I curious about? What am I curious about right now? And so the things that I'm curious about now, about this medicine experience and this healing and this transformation and this channeling, well, that's different than what I was curious about 10 years ago. And just following that path of curiosity. And that's the thing that if you're listening to this and, I really believe that the church sucks the life out of our curiosity. It tries to eliminate curiosity in large part because for most churches, there's a design to stay inside of a box that protects the members. It's designed to protect. Don't do anything that's not involving God, Holy Spirit, or Jesus, because that's dangerous. And I understand the positive intent behind that is to protect and keep the message pure and to protect you from evil things. But the reality for me has become, my curiosity is actually a gift from God. It's a gift to go down these paths of curiosity and say, what is it about this that resonates? What is it about this has truth? What is it about this that's healing? What is it about this that's transformative? So following that path of curiosity is so powerful. And for me, I'm in a really different place, right? With Awaken Magazine and Medicine Journey and Consciousness and channeling. But my curiosity has led me here. And I think one of the questions that I have wrestled with as I follow this path of curiosity is there any boundary in this process of exploring consciousness that, I guess, boundary of right, wrong, good, bad, evil, light, dark? Because I think one of the wrestling things that I wrestled with, and this goes back to inclusion of LGBTQ, heaven, hell, whatever it might be. For me, my experience of church in large part was what is right and what is wrong. And so now if I start to step out of those boundaries and follow my curiosity, the thing that scared me and can still make me a little nervous here and there is there any boundary? If I'm stepping outside the boundaries of the church, is there any boundary? Because all of Christianity, my experience was it's just a whole bunch of boundaries, like a whole bunch of don't do that, can't do that, focus on this, only talk about Jesus. And now that if I start to release those boundaries one at a time, because that's really what the conversation that I've been, sharing is, the releasing of those boundaries. Are there any boundaries at all? And is that healthy? Is it safe? I still wrestle with that in terms of the world of spirituality, especially when, people are promoting polyamory or different, expressions of spirituality that I think are kind of dark. There is no church to define what's in or out. It becomes more of a personal experience.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, follow that curiosity though. For me, that has been so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that there has been more safety in doing that than I would have expected under a previous Christian paradigm. I don't know yet if there are things to fear. I do know that we have much the same issues in any movement. There are people that want to just make money off the movement. There are people that are just culturally connected. They'll buy the beads, they'll have the crystals, they'll even do breath work and such, but they're not actually changing and becoming and such. What I do love about the discovery is that it felt like every discovery in the Christian faith was a pursuit of something that I needed to do to be a better Christian or to run the ranks or to be closer to God, or it just felt very task driven. where this feels very gracious. It's not like you're trying to achieve something. You're not trying to become more spiritual as such. There's a lot of grace in it from whatever being is involved in guiding you along this journey. You have the option to stop anytime, or to pause, or to slow down or such, because the goal is not to achieve some outcome. The goal is not to channel. The goal is not to do DMT. The goal is not, these are just tools. But the goal is to become you, is to know yourself, be yourself. From that space, you will know what your journey is and what it's meant to be like. What you're describing with light language in that moment sounds more like channeling.
Well, with the individuals, yes, I believe that is what is happening. Yeah, I believe that's what's happening on the medicine. Whereas in my daily experience of connecting with the divine, I will use light language, probably more in the spiritual, what we would call speaking in tongues in terms of a Christian environment of connecting with God. I still do that, but I do feel like it is more of a channeling type experience.
Does that sound the same as the tongues that you would speak in before?
It's like, as I mentioned, a little bit more intense, a little bit more forceful. It can feel a little bit like it's this powerful experience that's flowing through me. And it is still, Clint, really new for me. This has only happened in the last year multiple times. And that's the fun part about this journey is
it's so fun.
I don't have to have this figured out,
Yeah.
And it's also...
You actually never want to have it figured out. You actually want to stay on the journey of discovery because it is so exciting and it is so fun.
Yeah. I do still feel a bit of a embarrassment or a shame of, like in the Christian world, it's so much like you have to have everything figured out. You have to have the right answer. And so even if you were to tell me, well, if you were to, try to go deep with like, well, who do you believe Jesus is now? And have you got that all figured out? And where does the Bible fit into all of this? I can feel a little embarrassed to go, I am just not sure. Like, I'm just not sure. And there are some people that I interview who are very articulate, like a guy like Aaron Abke, or William Henry, these guys who are very articulate on the Jesus and the Bible and how it fits in more of a consciousness exploration. That has not been the path that I have gone down. And so I do feel a freedom as one who has had to have all the right answers in the pastoral context, a bit of a freedom now to go, yeah, and maybe it's lazy. Maybe it is lazy that I don't try to figure it all out, but I have a freedom to go, yeah, I'm not sure. But boy, I sure do love myself for the first time in the last couple of years.
Right.
Ever. Like I actually love myself.
And you're getting to know yourself and you find self-worth, which is the one thing that is stripped from you in the church. We've spoken about this many times. It's always external. It's always about someone else. It's always about relying on some God to come and help you. By the way, as a side note, if you're listening and you want to have a different paradigm about Jesus, go back and listen to our episode about salvation and if Jesus actually came to save you or what he might have been doing. Because I do believe Jesus was more of a conscious teacher than a savior. But yeah, it is a fun journey. It's amazing discovering yourself.
Yeah, it feels so much freedom to follow that curiosity and to ask, okay, well, what is this doing in my life right now? How is this helpful? What am I processing? And not to have the answers. That feels so good to me. And I can feel myself tense up a little bit because it's like I can feel all the judgment from, people that I would know in my life that are Christians. Like, no, you have to have the answers. You have to know. You're outside the boundaries, and you're in trouble. You are dealing with things that are satanic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people want to go there. That's all the paradigm that they've been taught. That's all the things. Be afraid of the unknown, and it's funny because if we go back pre-Constantine and we look at what Jesus most likely was preaching, I hate to burst your bubble, but he was preaching consciousness. He wasn't preaching this paradigm of don't discover. He was preaching discovery all the way through to that there might even be evidence of wine not being wine, but wine actually being psilocybin mushrooms. There's a lot out there for this. So, when you start thinking, oh, should I be more open? The answer is yes, you should be more open. And do you need to fear? No, you don't need to fear because you will learn as you go. And And you are actually much more protected and safe in this space than you think. So feel free to bust out of the box a little bit.
I had such a profound experience about 2 months ago. Mandy and I were doing a psilocybin experience here in our home, Medicine Journey. And I share these because they are such profound experiences. It's not something that I'm doing every month, where some people might do that. That hasn't been my journey, but they have been so profound in the last year. And we were literally I was sitting on the floor of our living room, and I have heard people over the last 3 to 5 years, as I've been exploring this movement, exploring spirituality and consciousness, I've heard so many people talk about oneness. I've heard so many people talk about the experience of unconditional love from the universe. And I can hear it. People talk about that in interviews. I can talk about it myself, but I had never personally experienced it, like a full visceral experience of oneness and a connection to all things. And as I am going through this medicine journey, all of a sudden, this veil is lifted, and I see this just all this bright lights and stars in the sky. And I have, for the very first time, 2 to 3 months ago, an experience, Clint, of a total connection to oneness and an experience of unconditional love that I have never even come close to experiencing in my life. And in the moment, I'm also simultaneously realizing that all of the things that I'm experiencing on a daily life are just a figment of my imagination. All of these things it's not the true reality. The true reality behind all of this is just this vast, vast experience of unconditional love. And I'm sitting there and I'm experiencing this. I'm blinking rapidly. I'm experiencing it. And simultaneously, I have this thought of all of those years of being in the church and trying to box in the experience of unconditional love. I'm experiencing unconditional love in the vastness of it, that there is no separation between me and unconditional love, and any separation for any of us between us and unconditional love is a figment of our imagination. And I'm recognizing, oh my gosh, for all that time in the church, unconditional love had been put in this box that you have to jump through the hoop of accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior in order to experience this unconditional love. And yet I'm sitting here experiencing it, and I literally started laughing out loud at how ludicrous it was to box in that unconditional love, that you would have to go through a certain door in order to experience something that you're actually experiencing right now. Like, we are experiencing unconditional love right now. We may not be fully conscious of it because of all of the things that are going on in this three-dimensional reality, but I started laughing out loud at how I had, and how the church does, put a condition on experiencing unconditional love. And it was comical to me. And yet at the same time, I can have a deep reverence and appreciation for my heritage, right? I can have a deep appreciation for those experiences like we talked about early on, and not look down upon those calling experiences, not look down upon those 10 years, not look down upon the theology that I used to hold, not look down upon the teachers that I used to follow and love, but to go, that's where I was at that time. That's what I understood. I have deep reverence and deep appreciation. And I also can have deep appreciation and empathy for those who are still in that spot, who are experiencing that, because that's what they need right now in their journey. And I'm in a different spot, right? And I even don't want to make it about right, wrong, good, or bad now. It's like, that's where they're at. I'm in a different situation, and I'm experiencing something that is really fruitful and dynamic and giving me so much freedom in this season of my life.
Well, it's like you said earlier, the stance of moving from knowing, I know, to I don't know, it's the absolute game changer. It's the exclusivity of the Christian faith and religion. I know. The conditions around so-called unconditional love even vary from denomination to movement. I mean, it's just like, it's so bizarre when you step away and you think about it. But the step is that step, going from I have to know it all, or I know these as absolutes, which you cannot possibly know as absolutes, moving towards I don't know. I don't know anymore. That is the step that's so amazing, and the one that opens up so much for you in this journey that's so beautiful. You have sat across from a lot of different types of people in what you do with Awaken magazine in particular, and the podcast interviews that you guys do, and it's amazing what you guys are putting together. But you've met kinds of people from all different spiritual paths, different encounters, traditions. I mean, I'm sure it's expanded your sense of the divine, but I'm sure it's also been challenging at times to stay open like that and to stay in that place of I don't know. So let's just see. Are there moments that come to mind for you?
Well, I think generally it's when I interview someone who believes that they are a galactic ambassador to our planet, that they would have the paradigm that their essence, their spirit, their soul, their light body has come from a dimension, not even just a planet, like not Mars, not Jupiter, not Saturn, but a completely different dimension, something that we do not have any physical record of, coming here in order to help us as a planet to raise our level of consciousness. When I interview those individuals, it really stretches me, to go, wow, okay. And they are talking about participating in galactic battles that the Galactic Federation is participating in, and how they're married to, some other galactic entity. If you've never heard people talk about those things, it's really mind-blowing. It really can open the mind up to a whole different way of thinking about life.
Yeah, I've got that in my box of I don't know yet, and I'll deal with that when I get a little bit down the line. That's because I do have friends like that, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to shelf that and stay on my journey for now,
right?
And I'll get there. But it's not that I don't believe it.
Yeah, those types of experiences. I think the thing that really has opened me up over the last couple of years of interviewing so many people like that is when I start to set aside all of the boundaries that I have had on what is right and wrong, or what is possible and impossible. All of a sudden I start having the possibility of interacting with people who have really different life and spiritual experiences than I do. And once I open myself up to having those types of conversations, I start to go, wow, this individual really is a loving, caring individual who's doing great things in the world. And they think about life and consciousness and spirituality completely differently than I've ever even thought of. And that is so fun. I would never even come across those people or have those conversations if I wasn't open, having the freedom that we've talked about. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And so now...
Well, it didn't. There's evidence. It didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And now I get to talk to these amazing people who have really different experiences, from near-death experiences. So many people have near-death experiences, and come back to talk about what they experienced, the life review that they had. And so many of those life reviews are very challenging, like that you want to live life differently, coming back and being a different person. I've had a conversation with a gentleman recently, Ken Lloyd, who is a multidimensional healer, who is I don't even have the right language at this moment. I'd have to look back at how he describes himself. But essentially, he believes that his original soul is no longer there inside of him, that he has had multiple entities come, and it's called a soul walk-in, and that they are kind of all tied together to utilize him to bring mass healing to the planet. And there are others who believe that their original soul spirit is not inside their body anymore, that they left and went back to consciousness, and then a different spirit came into their body, and that their loved ones are like, you are a completely different person. You are not the person who used to be in that body. And their loved ones, would kind of even speak to that. So those types of conversations can be very stretching and enlightening. And like you said, I guess I want to stay in a place that seems near impossible for where I was when I was a Christian in that context, which is reserving judgment and just saying, oh, This is this person's experience. What can I learn from it? What do I see as reality? Do I have to believe in this in order to have a fruitful conversation with them? Or can I just say, this is their experience, I'm going to learn from it? And it's one of the things that people oftentimes comment to me about my interview style is they feel like I really care about them. I really care about their story because I'm wanting to know about them. I'm very curious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that. And that is the move away from ego and judgment, of judging if they're right, if they're wrong, if they're whatever it is, and allowing somebody to be on their own journey. This is one of the things that have been so powerful in my marriage, is allowing my wife to be on her own journey. Allowing is a weird word. Like, you don't have to allow another soul, but the understanding within yourself that there's sovereignty, that every soul has sovereignty, and she has her own sovereignty for her journey. I have my own for mine, and that's all good. And that's very freeing, and it's a beautiful thing. And doing that in interviews and meeting people that are out of your paradigm as well. I just got to remember how much I didn't believe before that I believe now. You know, it's kind of like what's going on in the world with conspiracy at the moment. It's like all the conspiracies we thought, oh, that's just a conspiracy, turn out to be real to at least some extent. And it's kind of like that discovering as well. Having gone down this road, having met different people, having been in this conversation, having been way longer in time through this journey than I am, how do you think at this part of your journey you would define God?
Yeah, I think for me, I tend to utilize the word the divine for whatever reason. And I hear people in the spirituality space utilize different words to describe this. I love more and more the term source or source consciousness, that there is a source of all things. There is a fabric of existence that is behind all of this. That has been a major shift for me as well. And we have not talked about this, is that in the context of Christianity, everything revolving around God is worship. It is I am nothing and God is everything. I am sinful, God is perfect. And so there's this sense of always worshiping God. And in the spiritual context, it's more about experiencing the divine, or recognizing that I am divine, or that I am connected to the divine. There's very little or no sense of worship or adoration in that spiritual, kind of world. I actually find that I kind of miss that. So I just bring that to the table myself, right? I can have this reverence, this awe, this sense of love, of connection to source consciousness. But the main difference, Clint, is that I'm not bringing to the table, I am nothing, you are everything. I am evil or bad, sinful, you are perfect. I've released that. And so now there's an ability. Think if you were in a relationship with your wife and you were constantly thinking, I am bad, you are good, you are loving, I am sinful, and somehow wanting her approval or affection all the time. I mean, what a weird relationship that is,
absolutely.
Right? Versus...
It's hardly relational at all.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just trying to get approval constantly and perform in order to get that approval, as opposed to say, wow, there is this God, there is this being, there's this source consciousness that I can interact with, that I'm connected to, that I'm part of. And so I can have this experience of that divinity. I can recognize that I'm connected to it. I'm part of it. I am it. And so then it's more experiential of feeling that love, feeling that connection. And that feels so good. That feels more like connectivity, which I think is the ultimate thing that we're all longing for, is capital C, connection, right? We all want connection. And that's what we're trying to experience through all of these addictions and, relationships and different things. We're wanting that connection. And so now I feel like I have a connection with source consciousness, a connection with the divine, a connection with God that's not rooted in an initial assumption that I am bad and he is good.
Yes.
right? It's connection. And the thing that I love so much about plant medicine is it removes all of those barriers to that connection. It removes
Exactly.
all of them if you will allow it. And then that connection then feels so intense. And then I'm able to utilize that connection point in the context of plant medicine as an anchor that I utilize when I go, like I'm just in everyday 3-dimensional life, to go, oh, I'm always connected to that. I might not be able to see it, but I'm always connected to that because I've experienced it. I know what oneness is. I know what unconditional love is. I've been there. I've experienced it. I know it. And now I can utilize that as an anchor point in my everyday life.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That is absolutely. And connection to yourself as well, and understanding yourself and your journey and your soul journey and such. It's amazing because it is a vicious loop. The disconnect of having those conditions in order to connect, actually, it thrives on trauma and past trauma. That's why you see relationships where one party might be, like you say, seeking approval all the time from the other. That generally comes from parenting or a pain in the past of seeking that connection and approval and self-worth. The funny thing is, in the paradigm of church, you are actually never built up in your self-worth because it's not about you. And so your self-worth never fixes that connection. You're constantly in that loop of trauma. And you don't actually deal with your trauma because you're too busy trying to discover and deal with your sin, which is a nice, easy label to keep people stuck in. And so it's this loop that's created for you to stay in your trauma and keep hoping on some external force to come and help you while never discovering yourself and never dealing with the trauma. It's actually extremely sadistic if you think about it that way. I will also say that when we speak about plant medicine, this is not something about getting a handful of mushrooms, shoving them in your face, and then having this experience. There's a lot of intent behind this. There's ceremony behind it. There are proven ways of going about this in a setting with the right people, being in the right mindset, understanding this. It's not like you just do this and then you're awake. It's part of a journey and it's a tool. It's not the answer. And so I just want to put that in for those that haven't done that before, haven't explored that, again, because I carry great concern about the cultural instances of a movement like this versus the actual spiritual truth of it. And so definitely be mindful of that sort of thing. I feel, David, like so many people are waking up. I feel like so many people are going through awakening. I saw a thing the other day that said more people have gone through awakening in the last 4 years than the last 40. And more people have gone through awakening in the last 4 months than the last 4. And it's a beautiful thing to see and be a part of. Is that your sense as well?
It definitely is increasing in terms of speed, intensity. I think so much of, you say 4 years, I think, it's connected in large part to COVID. I hear that from the people that I interview time and time again.
Interesting.
They're like, well, during COVID, I hear that all the time, that it was the great pause for us as a world to start to question and say, do I really want to believe what I'm believing right now?
Right.
And I think that pause is so important. So many of us are on the hamster wheel or treadmill of just doing what we've always done. And for me, the pausing is what is so powerful. And even when you talk about the ceremony that's, surrounds plant medicine allows you to have a great pause. A pause, it's turning off something in order to accessing something else. Well, we can do that every day without that meditation or prayer or just being connected in nature. Pausing and asking and becoming thoughtful of, do I really actually want to continue to believe what I'm believing? Or what's the result of this belief? Or why do I believe this? Where did this belief come from? And I'm not talking just theological beliefs. I'm talking beliefs about ourselves. Beliefs about like, well, I should never do that, or I can't do that, or in my family, we don't do that. Or one of the ones that I always get people, laughing about is like when I was a kid, my mom would always say, you can't have white shorts. You cannot have white shorts as a kid. And so I had this thought around like this fear of white clothing, right? You cannot have, right? Because you're going to get it dirty, right? You're going to get it dirty. And so you just get people laughing about like, well, why do I cannot, hey, I'm wearing a cream shirt right now. Hey, it might get dirty, right? It's okay. Mom, look, I'm wearing a cream shirt, and I'm wearing some white shorts. Well, those types of small beliefs that have been handed down to us by our parents, our culture, our ethnic group, whatever it might be where we grew up, to question those and go, why do I believe that? Is that a helpful belief? The only way we can do that is if we're confronted with someone else who tells us that they have a different belief or a different way of seeing the world, which is what I love about the podcast, is you're getting to interact with people that have different beliefs than you. I love that. But also, if we're willing to just pause and get curious and say, why do I believe that? Why, and do I want to keep holding on to that? And start to release some of those things. And even try something else on. You don't have to take hold of that new belief forever. Just try it on for a day. Try it on for a week. What would that look like? What would it be like to believe that? How would that provide me with more freedom? I was always asked, what's the downside if I believe that? If I, way back when I was wrestling with heaven and hell, what's the downside if I believed that everybody got into heaven? What would be the downside of that? Well, okay. You just process it, Super helpful for me.
I always ask this question at the end. It's a pretty simple one, but profound. What is the one thing I should have asked you? Or what is the one thought that you want to leave behind?
I think the thing that I want people to know more than anything is that you're safe and you're loved. And so oftentimes when we're transitioning out of church, it can feel unsafe because we felt safe inside the context of those four walls. And so you are safe. You're okay. And more than anything, you are so loved. You're loved by God. You're loved by the universe. You're loved by Source. You're loved by us. And follow that curiosity because it's going to lead you down a very powerful path of learning, of exploration, of healing and transformation.
Exactly right. It's been so amazing chatting to you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And, we started this conversation about this sense of calling into doing good, sense of calling into helping people. My desire as I go through this journey is quite simple, to help more and more and more people bridge from religion through this awakening journey, which can be extremely difficult and extremely tough when you lose your identity and lose your world, into discovering yourself. Remembering actually is a topic we could probably speak about on its own at some point. But I know that you share some of that. How can people connect with you? What is the work that you generally do with people? Go ahead and close us out.
Yeah. Well, if you're in Southern California, we do have a breathwork and meditation studio here in Orange County where we do breathwork and meditation and sound baths and all kinds of things. It's called Behind the Lids. You're welcome to come join us anytime. And then in terms of the content that we're putting out into the world, it's called Awakened Magazine. Awakenedmagazine.com is the best place to connect with that. And really, pretty much 100% of my effort and time is going into what I call amplifying the voices of conscious leaders, healers, and coaches. And these are individuals who are bringing this love, this healing, this transformation, this awakening to our world. And so in no way do I feel like I'm some expert in any of these things. I just get to talk to all these amazing people who've invested their life in bringing this healing to our world. And so you can access all of those interviews and articles and everything at awakenedmagazine.com.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you found it valuable, please share it with someone who might need it too.
Remember, if you have left church or feeling you need someone to process some of these thoughts with, you can book a 15-minute discovery call on our website. You can also discover more of our mentorship programs and how I can help you through the void, bridging from what was to what is.
Visit unchurchingpodcast.com and follow us on Instagram at Unchurching Podcast. Till next time.
Cheers. Ciao. Goodbye.